Now, the first thing to say is that the video I'm responding to is about 4 or 5 years old. I believe it was made in 2017, so there is every possibility that CosmicSkeptic may have updated his views on this. But the very fact that the video is available on YouTube, particularly on his own YouTube channel, seems to suggest that he hasn't. Secondly, even if he has updated his views, in my opinion, the video still has enough errors to mislead people, so it ought to be responded to. Here it goes. In his video, CosmicSkeptic came up with a trilemma. Basically, the idea is that the idea of heaven and free will cannot coexist, and to make his claim, he came up with this 3-point argument. What if this and what if that? So let's address his arguments one by one, watch them and then address them at the same time.
Consider the following question. Can consciously imposed evil and suffering exist in heaven? Now, this might seem like a yes or no question, in other words, a dilemma, but I would argue that it's actually a trilemma. I think that there are 3 possible answers to this question. And the first is yes, consciously imposed evil and suffering can exist in heaven. But of course this makes no sense, because if one conscious being can impose evil and suffering upon another, then it wouldn't really be heaven at all. So we can immediately rule this one out.
So the first option he came up with is that yes, people will be able to act in an evil manner towards other people. They will be able to exact evil acts on other individuals. But then he also went on to say that, well, if that would be the case, then why would we call it a heaven? So, it's not a something, it's not a place where you would want to live. And quite rightfully, he said you can immediately discard that option. Yeah, I think that's a very, very good idea. Do discard that option, because this seems to be at best a philosophical possibility, but certainly it is not a theological reality or theologically supported reality. There's no theology would ever come up with the idea of people committing evil acts on other people, even in the heaven. So I think we agree on this part. So let's move on to the second one.
Option 2 is no, because God removes this part of free will from human ability. In other words, he disallows people from committing evil acts. But if this is true, then that means that as soon as you get to heaven, your free will is immediately restricted. You are no longer a free-thinking individual. And again, would you really consider it to be heaven if you're some kind of robot programmed to only be able to do good deeds with no freedom? Think of it this way. Under these circumstances, your free will does not exist in heaven. You can't commit consciously evil acts. But contrast this with hell, where you have no reason to, but there's nothing stopping you from being nice. You could say thank you as Satan throws you into a blazing fire. And this naturally lends itself to the conclusion that the only place that has true free will, the only place in the afterlife that is truly free, is hell. And of course, this also isn't a very satisfactory answer.
Now, this is the actual argument that he is building up, this option that you will not be able to commit evil acts upon other individuals in heaven. And if that is the case, then of course you will not be an agent exercising free will. Now, this is a hugely flawed reasoning, because it is based upon an assumption which is flawed to start with. For anyone to exercise free will, the subject matter of free will must be present. It must be intact. Now, for example, if you have the option of eating lasagna or pizza, then there is free will that you can exercise. You can take either of them. But if you have the option of eating either pizza or lasagna, well, you will not want yada, yada, yada. That's a hypothetical dish that doesn't exist, right? By the way, I'm terribly sorry if a dish called yada, yada, yada does exist in your culture. I profusely apologize, but I'm trying to make a point here. Now back to the topic. Now, the reason you will not ask for yada, yada, yada is because it is not part of your conscience. It is not part of your comprehension. So it doesn't exist. So the point I'm making is that all the negative emotions, the animosity, the jealousy, all the things that give rise to the evil acts that one individual exact on another, well, those emotions will not exist in our conscience in the heaven. Therefore, consciously, and this is the important word because CosmicSkeptic actually mentioned this.
Under these circumstances, your free will does not exist in heaven. You can't commit consciously evil acts.
So that consciously we will not be able to commit evil on other people because it's just not going to be there. Now, to say that you will not be able to exercise your free will is simply untrue because, as I mentioned, for free will to be exercised, the subject matter of free will has to be there. So in this case, that subject matter, i.e. the emotions giving rise to the evil, are not going to be present in heaven. Therefore, the entire argument is flawed. Let's move to the third one.
And that leaves us with our only remaining possible answer, which is no, this type of evil can't exist in heaven, but free will is somehow still retained, perhaps through some kind of theological magic. Of course, the problem with this line of thought is that it completely defeats the original objection. If you're arguing that there can exist a place, i.e. heaven, where there is both free will and no evil, then the argument that evil only exists as a result of free will doesn't make any sense. So I'm afraid that whichever answer you come up with to this trilemma, it doesn't lead to a satisfactory conclusion.
The third option is rather presumed one, that, well, there is going to be free will, but there is not going to be any evil. You see, in philosophy, one of the best ways to ascertain the truth value of a claim is by applying the principle derived from that claim on that very claim and then see if it holds merit. So what are the facts here? Well, the fact is that CosmicSkeptic believes that he does not have any free will and he lives on planet Earth. Well, the second one is not a belief, it's just a statement of fact. He does live on planet Earth. But if he believes that not having free will is like being a robot, then that's exactly what he is.
This is true, then that means that as soon as you get to heaven, your free will is immediately restricted. You are no longer a free-thinking individual. And again, would you really consider it to be heaven if you're some kind of robot programmed to only be able to do good deeds with no freedom?
A robot who probably is only limited to live life on planet Earth, who has no comprehension on what is possible or what is not possible in heaven. Therefore, there is no reason to take anything that he says seriously. And I say this with respect. I don't mean to be rude or don't mean to use any derogatory term here. But if this is what the idea is, that not being able to use free will renders one a robot, then that's exactly what CosmicSkeptic calls himself, and there is no philosophical or rational reason to accept anything that he says about heaven. Briefly, he also mentioned a point about hell, but that's largely irrelevant to this discussion, so I'll only mention one thing on this, that yeah, in hell when you will suffer, you have no reason to be good, but you can be good. So is that free will? Probably, but that's not a problem. We don't say that there is no free will in hell, but if you truly have free will in hell, in absolute terms, then would you be able to exercise that free will to get out of there? We all know the answer. And this was a response to CosmicSkeptic's video on the flaws in his reasoning and ideas on how the free will be available in paradise. Thank you very much indeed.